Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sermon with Hyde Park United Methodist Church in Tampa, Florida. I'm Matt Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement.
And I'm McGray de Vega, the Senior Pastor.
So McGray, you just finished preaching a sermon about faith and science.
Yep.
Two things that I think many people watching this or maybe studying this with a small group have wrestled with before.
Yep.
Maybe they've done studies on it. And you were telling me that that for you, this sermon could have been quite autobiographical.
Yes. Well, as I've said in sermons before, I grew up for most of my elementary, high school, college life thinking that I was going to be a doctor. And in order to receive a biology degree and go off to pre-med, I had to obviously take a lot of biology classes, a lot of classes in natural sciences, which in many ways were in conflict with my fundamentalist education that believed strongly in a literalist view of Genesis and a creation of the world in 7 days. And so I remember my freshman year in high school, literally Biology 101, where I had to learn for the first time about evolution. And that was just a small slice of the kind of world shifting that I had to do to pursue my biology major.
Oh, this is in college. Your freshman year of college. Okay, because I was like, you were at Keswick for high school. Like, they wouldn't. What were they? Did they teach biology at Keswick? What did they?
Right. No, they taught basic anatomy and physiology and cell biology from that level. But clearly, when it came to the origin of these things, the meaning of these things, it was strictly theological and a narrow view of biblical interpretation. Okay,
so your freshman year of college, which I don't mean to make this sound like a trope, but I think for many people watching, they've probably heard stories similar to this or have stories like this where it's that freshman year of college, you go away, you have that professor that just opens your eyes to a whole different way of seeing things. And that was your experience.
Absolutely. And so to find respite from all that, I decided to start taking some religion classes, thinking that the religion classes at this liberal arts college would be more in line with the safe haven, the insular bubble that I'd created in my fundamentalist world. So I took Introduction to Religious Studies, which did not help at all. It was even faster, more accelerated deconstruction of my faith when we read things like William James, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, Friedrich Schleiermacher, a whole bunch of religious scholars who were really challenging and undermining that tightly wound fundamentalist fabric that started in my biology class and got even faster in my religion classes.
So I think this is a helpful place to pause and kind of do a little bit of education as much as I can. And maybe you guys might want to look up more stuff online. But this idea that what McGray experienced, this fundamentalist upbringing, that is a very modern idea. A very modern way to read scripture, to think about faith. Like if you go back anywhere into the Middle Ages or the early church fathers, this idea that scripture had to be interpreted literally, and that theology had to comport to, or that the world had to completely comport to our understanding of theological topics, is a very 20th century idea.
Right. And it's rooted as a backlash against the Age of Enlightenment, which was a little earlier than the 20th century. But when you came to these wonderful ideas by Isaac Newton and others about the beauty of the intellectual enterprise, then come the 20th century, there's a whole line of theological ideas that said, well, wait a minute. We see where this is going. We're undermining the view of Scripture. And so really fundamentalism and people like Charles Nelson Darby and the whole dispensationalist thing that had a very literal view of Revelation, all of that was a backlash against modern scientific inquiry.
And I would think too, and this might be a place where we could kind of steel man their argument a little bit, because I think it's easy to straw man that argument, is they were concerned that we were pushing God out of all the places that we had found mystery and wonder of God in, right? Just like Psalm 19 is saying, the sun comes out of its canopy like a bridegroom coming out to the wedding, right? Like that language is beautiful. And then when someone goes, actually, the sun is what the earth is rotating around, and the sun is a hot ball of gas,
that's right.
And it's been around for 6 billion years. And people go, well, why do I need Genesis 19? And the work of the church, and I think the work that we both do, is to try and say, both are important and are necessary and needed.
And that's why it's a beautiful setup for why I think this whole religious fundamentalist backlash against science is built on a false premise, which is the suggestion that science eliminates the capacity for wonder and awe and beauty. Whereas, in fact, both science and faith have embedded into its foundation a natural curiosity about the world and the openness to things that we don't know, and an acknowledgement about our ultimate limitations to understand everything. Science is, at its core, is not so brash as to see or to believe that it can figure everything out. Mm-hmm. And faith, just by the nature of the definition of faith, is built on the reality of mystery. So curiosity can be the common meeting point for both faith and science. They don't need to be at odds with each other. They can both approach the mystery of the universe with a humility about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think as we kind of pivot now in the conversation, I think this is something that would be helpful for people who are listening or, again, studying this in a small group to think about. And that's that in our media ecosystem today, in our information ecosystem today, sometimes there are ways that doubt or careful study is weaponized. The idea that science can say, we're not 100% sure that this is how it goes. And then someone can come in with a meme or with a blog post and just go, well, that's why you shouldn't trust it in the first place, right? And that has a rich history. You guys may have heard of this idea called Gish galloping. It was actually created as an argumentation style by this guy named Dwayne Gish, who was a creationist with a biochemistry PhD. But he wrote a lot about like young Earth creationism. And he would go on college campuses, sound familiar, and argue with other scientists, but the way he did it was not coming from a good place. Basically, he would just flood them with all of these half truths and like falsities, knowing that they couldn't respond to all of them, right? And then when they would respond to just a few of them, he would still be able to say, "See, but you didn't answer all my questions," because the truth is, when you're a scientist, when you're someone who just takes faith seriously, this can work for faith or for science. These things take deep thought and careful thought. And they're not necessarily fit into the tightest sound bites or to the cleanest arguments. And that was weaponized by Gish and is used, and you see it all the time in our dialogue today, by bad actors just trying to make people of faith or people of science look bad.
So in psychology, there's a concept called enantiodromia, in which a person pursues something to such an extreme that they actually develop the aspects of the exact opposite of that very quality that they're pursuing. So in other words, a person seeks to be so physically strong, so works out, develops their body to become so physically strong that they actually become weak in other aspects of life, weak in their relationships, weak in their boundaries, weak in their sensibilities. And someone who desires to become so peacemaking to actually creates an inner conflict within themselves whenever there's conflict that comes up. Anyway, the idea of enantiodromia in this case is that a person pursues certainty to such an extreme that they become blind to their own weaknesses and actually create more questions and more curiosities in the wake of their pursuit of certainty. Certainly the case for Gish and other people who, in media or otherwise, proclaim such certainty that they're actually creating many more holes in their argument than they believe.
And I think the problem with today's algorithmic, and I'm sorry if I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I think this is exacerbated by today's algorithmic social media feeds, because those value certitude, those value tightness of messaging, right? Those value mimetic ideas of conveying things. And again, you've seen this, right? If you go to your social media feed and you go, you don't have to go too far. You'll find these things. You're like, that sounds really good. But the reality is, if someone's making something that compact, the reality is that there's probably something more complex going on there.
Right.
And I think that's just a reminder that that's something to be aware of as people of faith.
So that's a wonderful reminder. Here's a wonderful practical thing that you've prompted. If you are active on social media, just when you scroll through your feed, see what kinds of things are showing up, whether they're espousing certainty and conviction about certain things, or whether they are actually opening you up to curiosity and wonder, whether they're embracing things that you just don't know about and want to learn about. And if you're skewing much towards kinds of feeds that are trying to convince you about clarity about things, then maybe it's time to disrupt your algorithm a little bit and pursue some things that open you up to wonder.
You know what a great way to disrupt your algorithm is? Subscribe to Beyond the Sermon and share it with your friends. That'll disrupt your algorithm.
Then you will get 24-hour nerd talk all the time, which is probably a good thing.
I don't know what you're talking about. I had one final thing that I wanted to talk about, but I think for the interest of time, we're going to cut this. But if you're in a small group studying this, I think the biggest thing I would want you to do is, have a conversation about what kind of information you're seeing in your feed and kind of in your faith feed too. Like when you see people talking about faith, how are they talking about faith? And how are they talking about the relationship between faith and science and politics and things like that? If you get into that with your group, it might be helpful, because here's the truth. 25% of white evangelicals, or we could just say Christians for that matter, are pretty prone to conspiracy theories. That's just something that's true about us as people of faith. We have weird beliefs. We believe a guy was God, was dead, and then came back to life 3 days later. Like, we believe that happened. We have some real beliefs. And sometimes, though, those beliefs can almost be like hacked in some ways.
Ooh,
and
that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, we can be taken for conspiracy theories and things like that. So the best way to avoid that is community. Having people that you can talk to about this kind of thing. When you sit down with a friend and you go, hey, I heard this. And your friend goes, yeah, that's not true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe you should talk to your friend about it. Thoughts?
Yeah. And I would say even at the same time, we love these Beyond the Sermons to be evergreen. We happen to be sharing this with you at a time when we are making a major push at our church, Hyde Park United Methodist, for small groups. And we have discovered that small groups in community with people who have lots of different opinions can be the greatest accelerator for your own heart and your own mind. And so if you're interested in joining a small group, Disciple Bible Study, or any of a number of other ones, then just go to our Next Steps page.
That's right. I think that's a great place to wrap up. I'm Matt Hotho.
And I'm Magray de Vega.
And we'll see you next time.